Chairman Eddington, Chairman Mimura, Ambassador Miller, Northern Territory Chief Minister Giles, ladies and gentlemen. I'm making speech in Japanese. English speech practice was already spent in the Parliament today, this morning. I'm very much pleased to be at the luncheon today with those who have led the economic relations between Japan and Australia. My visit to Australia, which will be for the first time in 7 years as Japanese Prime Minister, aims for not just strengthening ties between Japan and Australia on the political and diplomatic fronts, but also enhancing trade and investment as one of its objectives. This time, a large number of people in the economic circles traveled with me, which symbolizes how attractive Australia is as trade and investment partner. Earlier, I was given an honorable opportunity to make a speech as Japanese Prime Minister at the Federal Parliament of Australia. As I mentioned in this speech, 57 years ago, back in 1957, the post-war Japan-Australia relations took the first major step upon concluding the Japan-Australia Agreement on Commerce, which was signed by Prime Minister Menzies and Prime Minister Kishi, my grandfather. Coal, iron ore, natural gas imported from Australia supported Japan's rebuilding and high economic growth in the post-war era. In the 1960s, Japanese companies entered into mine development business one after another, and Japan became the largest export partner to Australia. Against such background, Japanese-Australia and Australia-Japanese Business Cooperation Committees were established in 1963 and 1962, respectively. They have done such activities as holding an annual economic joint committee, dispatch of infrastructure, and holding seminars, which contributed to the promotion of mutual understanding and cooperation for more than half a century. It is needless to say that deepening their relations in the business field has greatly contributed to maturing the relations between the two countries, and has become a foundation of cooperation in the field of security and defense in recent years. I'd like to once again pay respect to the efforts made by each member of the Business Cooperation Committee. Among the numerous achievements that Japan-Australia and Australia-Japan Business Cooperation Committees left behind, the efforts for realizing the Japan-Australia EPA are particularly worthy of note. In the situation where the Japanese trade policies took a significant step forward in the direction of the bilateral EPA, Japanese-Australia and Australia-Japanese Business Cooperation Committees stressed the necessity of the Japan-Australia EPA from early on and backed up the government's efforts. In December 2006, over the telephone talks, Prime Minister Howard and I agreed to start Japan-Australia EPA negotiations from 2007. Negotiations started in Canberra in the year when a half-century had passed since the concluding Japan-Australia Agreement on Commerce in 1957. Since it was the first EPA with a country that exports many agricultural products, it took 7 years to conclude the negotiations. However, during this period, thanks to the enthusiasm of both countries that had the intention to promote the liberalization and rule-making of trade in the Asia-Pacific region and deepen the economic relations, in last April, Prime Minister Abe and I came to a substantial agreement. I'm extremely delighted to sign the agreement between Japan and Australia for an economic partnership, along with the Prime Minister Abe later in the day. With the Japan-Australia EPA put in place, the two countries' economic relationship will be enhanced to a new dimension. It will also lead to ensuring competitiveness and facilitating activities for companies and investors. Furthermore, a stable supply of energy, mineral resources, and food will be strengthened. We will continue to strive for the entry into force of the EPA at an early date. Since 2007, when EPA negotiations started, the Japanese economy has experienced a number of ordeals, such as global financial crisis, the Great East Japan earthquake, and so on. However, the policies that my cabinet has been rolling out, namely aggressive monetary easing policy, flexible fiscal policy, has been driving away people's negative economic sentiment, developed under the inflationary trends, and achieved positive real GDP growth for 6 consecutive quarters. Many of the Japanese companies' indices, many of Japanese economies' indices, such as employment, capital investment, and share price, have been improving. In June this year, we revised the Japan Revitalization Strategy as a growth strategy that encourages private sector investment, which is the third arrow of Abenomics. And we are advancing reform of the labor system, utilization of competent international human resources, having agricultural sector and healthcare nursing sector become growth industries and so on. Now is the time to put the virtuous cycle of the economy, which started with Abenomics, on the growth path. We are going to dauntlessly strive to take on the rigid regulations and systems that are like bedrock and move the growth strategy forward in a powerful manner. I hope there will be a number of investments coming from Australia as well. I believe that many of you are very much determined to make investments into the Japanese market, I believe. Today, along with the Economic Partnership Agreement, I am expected to sign an agreement on the transfer of defense equipment and technology as well. We will further strengthen the relations between the two countries in the field of security and defense as well. It is none other than a mutually trustful relationship on the economic front lasting more than half a century that we have been able to enhance such cooperation. Once again, I'd like to pay respect to all of you gathered here today for the great contributions you have made so far to the relations between the two countries. For our part, we will further strengthen our partnership with Australia, with whom we have reached a new special relationship, and contribute together to peace, stability, and prosperity of the region and the international community. We'll also pay greater attention to expanding the base for the Japan-Australia relations through not just strengthening the political and economic ties, but also the exchange of young people who will lead the future. In 2011, on March 11th, there was a Great East Japan earthquake. You extended great support to the people of Japan. So on behalf of the Japanese people, I'd like to express my deep thanks to you. Starting from today, Japan and Australia's new age will be starting. All of us who are gathered here today will act as one to carry this wonderful relationship onto the next generation. Thank you for your attention.